Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're at in the world. I'm Nicole Sackage, and I'm here with Grant Cameron today. Hi, Grant.
How you doing? Happy birthday.
Thank you. It is my birthday, celebrating big time here in Illinois. Today, we're continuing our series that I've been calling Ufology, Art, and Music. And today, we're joined by a very special guest from the UK, and her name is Alexis Johnson. So, welcome, Alexis. How are
Hi, Nicole, and happy birthday too.
you? Thank you. Thank you. And let's kick this off. How did you guys meet each other? I always like hearing the little stories of how Grant finds people or people find Grant. So,
Would be me, wouldn't it? I made contact. I made first contact.
First contact.
I listened to a higher side chat and with Grant, and it was just great because he was connecting and talking about consciousness and art, and also connecting all the dots, all these separate areas, subjects. We love categorizing, putting everything into categories and making them all separate. And what Grant was doing was just unifying them all together, and it just felt so very right. So I just felt I had to reach out as an artist just to say that I've had similar experiences and how important the work is that he's doing, really. So
I think in ufology we call those synchronicities, don't we, Grant? When all those things start adding up together. So,
but it does sort of ring a bell when you put it out there. Certain people go, "Oh, I know what it's about," and that's, I think, what we've got to change in the field is that vast majority of people don't know this connection, that there is this thing beyond the lights in the sky and the paranormal phenomena and all this kind of stuff. There's something much more significant going on, and that the people who have had the experiences, like Alexis, know, and they reach out. And the more we do this, the more the consciousness of the world will rise and realize there's more to the world than just the nuts and bolts and paying the bills and stuff like that. That there's this sort of other level of the universe going on that people aren't aware of.
right. So, Alexis, what were a few of those synchronicities that prompted you to want to call Grant? Like, was there a big one where you're like, that one is spot on? Like,
it'd been happening that week, where I'd been sort of like pretty much being sort of urged by, I don't know, is it spirit, is it guide, is it higher self? Who's talking to us? It's like I was being urged for probably about a week and a half before that I had to share the story. If we go back even further, from about 2015, I was being told to find each other, like other artists, that is, specifically, who have these types of, who are working within this framework and within this frequency, who are playing around with sort of the right brain that's tuning into to perceiving things beyond our visible perception, beyond the external senses. Working with the inner senses. And so it's really it was just because I'm being urged to be able to speak out. One of the things I sort of wrote to Grant about was how artists, I think it's really very common for a lot of artists to experience what I'm experiencing. I'm not putting myself out there as somebody with an extraordinary experience, but what it is that I'd say that we're all in hiding. I think maybe we all got burnt as witches in the past, and so there's a sense of needing to come out, and if we don't come out now, when are we going to come out? So that's the urging, that's the voice. It's we've got to share these stories, and we've got to put it into a framework so that we can actually have conversations about this, not hide it.
Yeah, one point I'd like to make there is the fact that you're talking about, you mentioned before about putting it into lists. And that is because we live in this very left brain world, and the left brain is into lists and planning and all this kind of stuff. And you always hear this thing about the shift of consciousness or the awakening and stuff like that. And I think that's the female right brain that is more into the whole of the universe and the oneness and all that kind of stuff that's coming forward. So I think it may be this, you're talking about the sort of coming out, that you and others are sort of now coming out and helping this shift take place?
That would sound good. Yeah, and it is just that sense of urgency and urging that it's now time.
Did it go back into your childhood? Did all this stuff, like how did your childhood work? Were you sort of, if you look back, is this all sort of like a plan where this all is coming together?
Well, from my childhood, it was everything primarily has come to me through. Oh, have we lost Nicole for a second?
Oh, she's just turning her camera off.
I don't blame her. It's her birthday. So from my childhood, things were coming through very strongly as dreams, and I think that that's how it's continued until more recently, where I've been able to work within a sort of waking consciousness with a lot of this. But with my childhood, it was a sense that we're one, we're one, we're one. I'm being told that all the time in dreams, we're one, we're one. And then if I reflect back on how I worked in school, I used to be really confused because I used to be, the teachers would be telling you to look at things and have to learn things. I was like, well, we're all connected to wisdom and knowledge, and we can just get it like that. We just ask and we get it. And I just didn't understand why they would be saying that you had to work at finding the answers when I'd just say you could just tune in and get that. And then another thing that I used to have, partly probably because I've got bad eyesight on one eye.
Okay.
So my vision was pretty bad as a child, still not great, which is great for a visual artist. But I used to sort of like, they used to write letters on the board, and I would just be, what are they doing? Like what's going on? And I couldn't understand how other people would then be able to then copy that letter. It was so abstract, onto other words, onto pieces of paper. I used to think they were working with telepathy. I just thought that was the natural conclusion. And so for many years at school, I felt the whole situation was working telepathically. So it was that for me was how I perceived the world to be, until I had to learn later. They had to keep trying to drill that out of me. And I was like, no, it's like this. And they kept working on drilling that out. They put you into sort of like little sections and go, okay, well, you're not perceiving in the same way as us, so we're going to have to put you as remedial, and so you're given this experience for a reason, but all the way through as a child, you're just like, none of this makes any sense. This framework, this program that we're experiencing, none of it makes any sense. But it was really sort of probably from my very early 20s, maybe it was sort of late teens, where I started to get precog dreams. That's when it really started to kick in. And I still don't fully comprehend why I get them. And they come in intensity and frequency, and then they sort of stop, and then they come. But I think the only conclusion, when you see what's going to happen the next day, and one of the things I need to say is you can change it. Sometimes you're shown it so you can change it. But when you're seeing what's going to happen the next day, you know that time can't exist, not in the way that we're told. And then you just need to look at Einstein's formula, and you go, well, hold on a minute. So time can't exist, but time is entwined with space. So then space doesn't exist either. And so I spent most of my time talking to all my friends and saying, no, space and time doesn't exist.
Wow.
I would have loved to have been at one of those parties. Or in the bed, you're like, no, it doesn't exist. Everybody's like, oh, here she goes again. Like, I don't know, I've been at a few of those, and it's mind-blowing. But so you were in your early 20s when you finally found others that thought like you. How was that experience when you guys got together and could sort through these ideas?
Oh, I didn't find people. I was just with other artists.
Oh.
And I was like, it was when I was doing my art degree. So I was with other artists, and when you're with other artists, you're allowed to have these kind of open conversations. And I was lucky enough to have friends who understood and connected, and scientists as well. I've connected in with scientists who've really sort of taken it on board as well. and open. But I think it's been a much, much longer journey to find other artists like me. I'm in my late 40s now, and I'd say that I've only just started to connect to those people who are working in similar ways. It's only since 2015 when I got the message, you have to find others like you. It's time now. That I started to actively try and find these people. And you're trying to find each other through the eyes because everybody is in deep hiding. And they put a face that if you go through the art system, the art sausage factory, you're given a particular story, and it's through the education system, and it's through the industry, and art's been boxed. This is what art is. It's all very palatable. It's all very it works within our framework. You can sell it. It's branded. It's all very, very neatly packaged. And so a lot of artists are given that, and they go, well, I'm actually experiencing this, but I can't talk about that because we're told that this is what art is. It's a product, it's a painting, it's a piece of music, and you're not allowed to work across art disciplines either. It's just like you're either a filmmaker or a painter or a dancer. You can't be all of those things, I'm afraid. And so all of it sits within a sort of like a framework of working within industry, because then you can sell the service, you can sell the product. And so what you've got is therefore a lot of artists who've been taught this idea of scarcity, that there aren't many artists that can get to the top. The amount of times I'm told about Van Gogh, it's ridiculous. And it's like you keep getting given that myth. And so a lot of the artists who are channeling their work, because I used to, when I was painting, I used to just look back at the end of the painting and just go, who made that? You disappear. You can disappear sometimes for 2 days. I'd have a studio in London after I graduated, and I would just be painting, and it's just like, oh my goodness, 2 days have gone past. Wow. Who did that painting?
That's what I wanted to ask you just before you brought up. Can you get into this thing about the channeling work? Because I actually interviewed now Sandy Ingo. Do you know Sandy Ingo, the spirit painter? And she's in the UK, where she believes that Da Vinci is painting through her, and she paints dead people. If you've ever seen her stuff, and she talks about this thing where she just disappears, and the hand starts to paint, and it comes out, and she doesn't know, what it's about or anything like that. So describe this channeling process of art for people that aren't artists and don't understand this.
Well, I mean, what you've got this world of imagination. You've got your inner senses and your outer senses. The Greeks talked about the inner senses, and then it got sort of lost along the way. And it's this wonderful creative world of imagination. And ultimately what you're doing is taking that inner landscape and you're putting it onto a canvas, onto music, onto, whatever art form, into sort of somatic movement and dance. And so we get the inspiration. But ultimately, when you start putting your sort of like, you put your tool on the canvas, as it were, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen next. You've got this inner landscape. But usually what then happens is that you get very much into process. And process seems to be the way through and into this. So it's kind of, when you're painting, for instance, it's a very rhythmic, it's a very rhythmic, repetitive kind of motion, and you're doing this kind of movement, and you're doing this flow, and you're very much in your body when you're doing it. And then you're working with the sort of like the colors and connecting to the colors, and then you're working with the shapes and making the shapes balance. It's constantly about balance, and you get very, I suppose you almost sort of like hypnotize yourself by getting into it. They call it flow. In terms of creativity, that's the sort of technical word for it. You go into flow, and you're basically working rhythmically, and you're working with sort of like the senses, and you're kind of working with trying to put them into patterns almost. But there's a point where your brain, your left brain, completely switches off because you've kind of probably almost hypnotized yourself. It's probably the equivalent of listening to a shamanic drum, so that you can turn that left brain off. And there's different methods of turning that off. You do it through body movement, you can do it through chanting. We don't all have to do ayahuasca to do it. We do it all the time. You do it when you're driving, unfortunately. Yeah. And so you go into that sort of like very deep altered state of consciousness. And I'd say what I say is that you can't remember afterwards where you've been necessarily. You don't necessarily have a recollection or a memory, other than you've been very focused on getting the composition balanced and the colors balanced. That for me. And then that takes it to another level, because then what I've been very, very interested in, and the thing that I've probably spent most of my adult life doing, is how can you then do that with others? And so how can you then do that with other artists, where you go into a flow state collectively together through body and movement, through color, through sound, and through speech? How can you get into that sort of like intense moment collectively, and then you come out the other side and go, what did we just make? And this is where, for me, the art world tells you that the art is about the product, but ultimately for me it's about the process, because that process of flow, that altered state of consciousness that you go into as an artist to create that product, it's a temporal process, but that process is it's really the essence of what art is. And I really think it's very exciting, not just working as an individual artist, but working collectively, because it's an incredibly powerful, energetic thing that you're doing, and it is almost ritualistic. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's the thing that I've been really particularly interested in.
Can you describe the process of understanding that you had to talk to these people? How did you arrange to get other artists? And is there a technique you use? Because I talk flow state as well. And I know when I'm in the flow state, but I really don't do anything to get it. I just know when it's there. I'm in the flow state and sit quietly and get ready to write down what's coming. And it's like it's real. The difference between a thought and you're talking to God. It's like, oh, I know what this is. It's almost like you've been there before, you've seen it before, you recognize it. So what was the process that you used? Because you got the message in 2015. So what was the process you used to find these artists, and what kind of process do you go through to do this joint collective experience?
So the thing with being kind of almost in hiding around this, and still sort of like balancing the fact that you can't quite fully come out about what we're doing, because when you're co-creating, I say that you're co-creating with the other artists, but I think you're also co-creating with entities or spirit or whatever it is, or energy beyond the visible, perceivable world that our senses give us and our brain is allowed to compute. I think what you're often doing is balancing it. So what I started to do from 2015 is that it was a call going out to do residencies with artists to come together to co-create new work. And those pieces of work, what I found is it works really well with installation work or with performance. But with artists from different disciplines, so musicians working together with dancers, working together with graphic artists and people who do writing, really mixing up the different art forms, and then putting people within a sort of pressure cooker, intense situation where they're kind of living, eating, making art together. And then what seems to happen within that process is that people sort of go into this flow state together, then they sort of crack up because it's really intense, and they usually sort of like it usually goes off like a firework, because artists are very used to working and having their own sort of autonomy in what they're doing. But then what happens is it just suddenly settles down, and then this flow happens and a performance comes out of it, or visual art, installation, music comes out of that process collectively together. So it's quite fascinating, and I'm interested in, I do it with communities, young people, And I've taken that model and doing it with other artists as well, which is much more difficult than working with community. Community are a lot more open sometimes to it. But I'm interested in it because I think it's a really valuable process for society. It's really valuable for us to understand how we can collectively work together as individuals, but also as a collective. And we've got to learn it because we've not been brought up knowing how to do it. But when we go into that state of flow, what I've done is over those, since 2015, is come up with different methods. And I keep doing different methods all the time. I find that it's very useful. Obviously, you've got to have a common aim, a common intention, a common goal. It's good to have the pressure cooker of knowing that you've got an audience at the end of it, so it has to happen. And then also then putting equipment into place. So like the last project that I did, which was in July, June, July, was we got this like horseshoe shaped structure, and everybody was on it and balancing on it because there were quite a lot of circus artists working within it. So people were balancing and moving, and then that created a sort of rhythm, and then that created a dance performance almost, and then that it affected the music and the rhythm of the music. Before that, in Sweden, we did a project where we had a big kind of tower. We had a big pole to focus the energy down, and then everybody danced around this pole, and they worked in pairs, and they were like having to support each other in pairs, so the movement was flowing together. So apparatus helps. And then having a sort of theme for what that piece is going to be, but they're very abstract pieces.
Yeah.
So the process is abstract, and the final piece is very abstract too, but it's kind of resonating on the.
You have to initiate these people or describe what's happening, or does everybody seem to know? Like you seem to understand the whole process, and that you can do this. Do you have to sort of tell people this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're opening, and the flow state, or does it just happen? Do these people understand it as well as you do, that there's this oneness and this connectivity between everything?
Yeah, I find that if I tell people at the beginning, they're going to run a mile. And also it's for them to take what they need from it. So I don't want to also impose my opinion, my bias into the process, and people will go as deep as they need to be going at that point and what they're prepared to do. But there is sometimes resistance in that process, but I still think that because they're just like, what's going on, what are we doing? But at the same time, I think it's almost like I don't want to ruin the surprise. One of the projects that I did in Lithuania, by the end of it, the artists were like, it was the most beautiful moment because all the artists had their arms linked together, and we were all walking down the street. Everybody was just in a different state of mind, and they were just going, together we're better, together we're better, together we're better, chanting, walking down the street. It was such quite a remarkable moment. Whereas when we started with the artists, they'd said, no, this doesn't happen in Lithuania, because it's, they're like a nation who see themselves as victim, repressed from the Soviet regime, and that nothing ever happens here, and everybody's leaving to go and live in other countries, and this is not a place where things happen. This is not a place where we make it happen. And then at the end, everyone's linked arms, together we're better. All different. The other thing is, people are, a lot of the time when I'm working in these European projects, there's people all working with different languages, but we're connecting through the unified art language. So sometimes it's good to have a barrier of language, because you have to work a lot more telepathically. You're having to work with you're having to work with your eyes to connect with your eyes. Your thoughts are synchronizing. The synchronicities that happen in terms of the words that come out, because the artists will start saying the same words as each other. There's a point where everyone attunes, basically. And I think, I don't tell them beforehand, and maybe I should. My conscience isn't completely clear, because sometimes I think maybe I should be telling them beforehand. But also it's like for them to have that experience and go as deep as they want.
I like it. Like you said, I think in my mind, if people are a little lost in what you're trying to explain, like at a very simple level, kind of what you're describing is a jam session with musicians. I think we've all been in a pub or a bar, and it's like you see the band, they kind of start looking at each other and they're like going with it. And then the next thing you know, this is where I say don't tell people, because the next thing you know, it's like you have their bandmate passing out the tambourines and the harmonica. And next thing you know, the whole pub has like joined in and they're playing along with this. And then there's always the person that like, they think they're going to mess it up and their friends get them to join in. And then they just add to it so much. So I can understand like this collectiveness. Like I have experienced it with music, and I wish I was a better artist in other factions, but I can see this. And I'm Grant, you might like this since you just came off your Illinois metaphysical tribe, but can't you imagine like a big tribe event like this where it's like there's this collective art piece going along with a CE5 circle? Like
Yeah.
it'd just be great. And the music, like dancing is one thing I do to kind of raise my vibration and get in the field. And so when it's that rhythm, after you hear a rhythm for so long, your heartbeats even sync together, and it's amazing. So I love hearing you describe it as well. And
Yeah.
I think what I want to ask is, when you're in these collective states with other people, have you guys received messages? Like, I know you said you try to focus something like with an intent, so you guys are all on the same page, but once you send this out into the universe, do you guys receive a message back, or is there, yeah.
Yeah, you receive messages. You're getting messages from spirit, or we don't know the word, so we've just been saying the word spirit because we found that a useful one. You're getting messages, an awful lot, and different artists getting them at different points. But the ones who are probably most open to the idea of it and maybe more practiced in it are receiving those. So one of the projects that I've been working on is a project called Libertaria, and it started between myself and an artist called Isabel Lagos, who's based in Sweden. We met in Croatia. We got one of those synchronistic phone calls from Capital of Culture in Croatia, in Rijeka. They were doing Capital Culture, and they said, "Would you like to come over and work with our artists, our producers, to help us train them up to be ready for a Capital of Culture?" And so we met in 2019, I think it was, and we sat downstairs in a bar in the hotel that they put us up in, and we just realized we were very sort of like worked in very, very similar ways. We call ourselves hot palm artists because the healing energy comes out of, there's also a healing element to what we're doing. Yeah. The energy comes out, and we're sort of like, the left brain trying to grapple what's going on, but the right brain just saying, just go with it, flow with it. And these pirates started to come through. So I started channeling the voice of pirates from the sort of 16, 17, 1800s. And it transpired that Isabel was running a pirate house that was owned by pirates in Sweden, in Gothenburg. And we, it was a bit of a journey over the sort of like next year. We were told December 2019 by these pirates, there's going to be a great reset, and you really need to hurry up on this. Hurry up. And it was the reset word. And we were just telling all the artists, there's a reset coming. There's a reset coming. Wow. And so the Libertaria project is very much, it's the story. We've then done co-creation around it, but the story is being channeled by these pirates who were co-creator pirates, and they were sort of looking to create a different way of life. They wanted to get out of empire and live a different way of life, and so we've looked at how they then worked collectively with them, how they've told us about it, how they then work collectively, and then we've looked at that model for the co-creation model. So we're constantly getting messages through. At the same time as that, I got I personally got messages through from giant ants that were about 6 foot tall that came to moved into my house for a bit. And they gave a very important message around the co-creation. The message came onto my hand. It was shown on my hand, and I got given a sort of a symbol that looked like that, and it said connect. I said, well, what does that symbol mean? It was glowing. It was moving around, and they said you need connection. This is a message for how we need to co-create as humanity. I think you need to be able to connect to each other, and in order to be able to connect to each other, you need to have compassion, and that came as a symbol, which was a line here with a shape there coming out, and that you need to have compassion in your heart for each other in order to be open enough to connect. And the other message came through is that you need power. And that came through as a symbol like that, like an upside down Y. But I've been told that it can go both ways. Doesn't matter. Wow. And that you need power. And what I realized from that is you need to be able to, it's not just about how, it's not just the fact that there are people who give power over, but a lot of us as artists, especially co-creator artists, give our power away constantly. And that's probably the biggest problem. We're constantly giving our power away. So that message came through very, very strongly around self-power, or I could almost say higher self-power. So it's that sense of sort of just simply just sitting within that, because this is where all the stuff comes through when we're co-creating, where things inflame, the ego inflaming, people just feeling insecure, because it's a really difficult process to get your head around. When you're in it, you're in flow and it's great, but there's resistance to go into it. And I understand that. So the power is important. We've all got to be able to hold our own power in order to do this. And then the last symbol that I was given that's a formula. You put those three together, connectivity, compassion, and power, and you put those together and that equals unity. And then that was given as a figure of 8 that was flowing in this motion, as like a light. And so that was a very important message. It came with a blue beam of light and these ant beings are presenting it. So yeah, you're constantly given messages for the next thing, and you get given them, I think, when you need them.
This is absolutely fascinating. So let me ask you, you talk about Lithuania and Sweden and the United Kingdom. Are you sort of, you're being directed, you're being given sort of instruction. Is this sort of a worldwide movement that you're part of, where you're acting on somebody's behalf or following the instruction you're getting? And talk about how wide this has gone. And have you ever gotten stuff to do in America, or do they want this as a worldwide thing? It seems like you're sort of at the center of a message that they want out for the world. Would I be correct?
Yeah, there is a message, and I think as I was saying earlier, it's like I'm saying this now. It's really difficult because it's like, I mean, I can talk, but in terms of it's the Irish in me. But in terms of being able to come out and talk about this, it's not the done thing. Not if you want to be sort of taken seriously, we're told. But I've been told very strongly, we've got to get the message out. We've got to be able to talk about this, because it is about helping humanity to learn how to find how they can be an individual and have their identity, but also be able to work collectively for the common good, I suppose. So through the process of doing art, the art gives you the message, it gives you the process. And you can get within that flow state, but it's also a way of being for how we could be as humans. From 2015, when that message came through, I was working with a UK arts organisation, and I just started putting some applications out for things. So to do these types of projects, they gave me the autonomy to do that. And so and now I'm gone back to working as a sole trader again, which I'm very comfortable with. It's what I've always done.
What is that? Can you define that?
I work it as an independent. I like my autonomy. So, But it was very useful at that time in 2015 because I had the umbrella of a larger arts organisation underneath me. So I put some applications out and ended up working with British Council, who I'd worked with sort of in the 90s as a sole trader, but working out in West Africa, working with artists over there. And then from there, they then got me to go and work in Brazil on the Rio Olympics, again, working with this process of co-creation. And again, working across Europe on European projects with applications that I'd written for European money to connect artists. And then I'm writing some of this stuff up for a PhD in Australia, and then I've connected in Canada with a university in Canada to connect artists up. So all these opportunities to connect people just came through really easily. I didn't really look for it. It came to me almost. And it's not necessarily that all the artists are receptive to this. They don't all want to work in this way, but I suppose it's giving them a blueprint and giving them permission to be able to work in the way that they probably always have worked anyway.
It almost sounds like they're sort of putting these things in your path to help you fulfill it. So are you documenting? You said you're doing a PhD in Australia. So
Yeah,
how do you get the message out? Like, you're coming here on this show and a lot of artists will be watching it. You'll probably get some contacts, but how do you get the message out, or is that something that you really haven't figured out yet?
I'm in a bit of a flow state. So yes, I'm flowing with it. But yeah, the message came, you've got to write this down. So that's where the PhD came from. It's like, you have to write this process. You've got to document this process. And the co-creation process I've been doing since the 90s. And like I said, I've done it with community, especially around cohesion, because it works very well around cohesion. It's got a real healing quality to it. It goes very, very deep. And so I've been on this journey for a long time, and I know I'm not the only artist on this journey as well, at all. We're all out there, and it was only 2015, which was, you need to all find each other now. Now's the time to find each other. And what I remember doing a piece of research in 2014 where I talked to a lot of artists I think I talked to something like 60 artists in the UK, and pretty much everybody were islands working unto themselves, but they were co-creators because they were working with community creating art, and they all had very similar methodologies. And what's really interesting is that the methodologies that we all use, it's not taught. None of this is really taught. It will be in the future, but it's getting there, but it's not quite taught at the moment. So people have come to those methodologies themselves. The conflict is that because they've come to it themselves, they can be quite protective and say, well, that's my methodology. But really what I'd say is that we're being guided, we're picking it up, we're open, and we're having it fed into us as a methodology to then do with communities, other artists, young people, elderly, whatever groups we're being directed to work with. So I think that again, there's the resistance in terms of, we don't want to come out and sort of lose our reputation through this, because this is not what artists are and traditionally meant to be. And then the other resistance can potentially be, well, I came up with that idea, that's my idea. When I think, and I'm never saying that this is my idea at all. Co-creation is out there, absolutely. I suppose all I'm saying is we need to be aware as artists that when we're co-creating with other artists or with community, we're also co-creating with place. That's very important, because place talks to you very, very strongly. And we're co-creating with other than human, whether that's the plants and the mountains and the trees, or whether that's the beings beyond that. And then on top of that, we're also co-creating with spirit, because we're getting these very clear and strong messages that come through to us, especially when we're within that altered state of consciousness, of flow, through rhythm and music and chanting and whatever we do to get there.
I think there is a special role for artists, because that's what I've sort of pointed out with musicians, that you have this sort of aspect where they have this tie-in. And that's why I always say, whether like the female brain, the right brain is been locked down by the left brain. You know, the idea that it's like a football game, like a soccer game, and it's like me versus you, good versus bad. We're going to win at all costs and stuff like that. And I always said, like with women, that, you know, hopefully women take over the world before it's too late, because the men are busy destroying it. So I think there is that positive aspect that you have to rely on, I think, artists who are in that world, even though they may be a little hesitant to come out, they can understand it. Whereas if you talk to somebody who's in the left brain world, they're going to go like, time out, I'm leaving, like, don't even talk to me anymore. They just don't get it. So I think if the world is going to be saved, I think it's people like your mission and the mission of musicians and stuff to change it into a more of a right-brained female unity world where everything's one, everything's family and this sort of thing. So I acknowledge. Where in Canada are you? Because I'm from Canada, so where had you contacts here in terms of doing this?
Victoria.
Oh yeah, that's like God's country. It's sort of like almost like California, like San Francisco, where there's a lot of artists. I've got some relatives that live there, so, and they're into art and stuff like that. So that would be the place. That would make sense. It would be BC and on the island there.
Yeah, when I went there, it was the first time I'd ever breathed air. I hadn't realised that my whole life I hadn't been breathing air. It's the freshest, cleanest, most beautiful air you can breathe.
Wow.
You've been around the world. You've been all around the world. Did you find you had to? Is it? I mean, you're funded for all this stuff because you travel on quite a bit for.
Yeah, it's public money, so it comes under the banner of it's either, when you're working with community, it's about cohesion.
Yep.
And you sort of connecting groups that are experiencing difference, and so that you can find that understanding, mutual understanding, you know, sort of shared memories, commonality, just brings community together. And then you, on the other side, it's also working with artists to develop cultural ecosystems, because I think it's important to recognise that we're not an island. We don't just work on our own, that it's really good to work within strong cultural ecologies, whether that's a rural network of artists connecting together or a city of artists connecting together. And then if cities and cities connect, then the artists can tour and take their work. And so you're creating opportunity. So it's about connecting people so that they can create those opportunities for themselves. And I think again, another one of those barriers is this power thing, because a lot of the artists working within community or co-creation, they're very giving, and they're sometimes very gentle, kind of people, maybe sort of a bit quieter, and so softer. And it is, like you say, it's that feminine attribute. It's not necessarily masculine or feminine. It's just the feminine attribute within all of us needs to be able to balance, right? Because the masculine element pushes forward. My art degree was just pure masculine attribute. As long as you can go for that and chase it and compete, and you get there with that scarcity. Whereas this is a different way. This is just simply saying there's no scarcity. Let's just work collectively together, and together we really can create. We can create an audience that wants to connect to art. We can create artwork which is richer and brighter and better, because we can bring music and paintings, and we can bring all the different art forms together and make it really much richer. So it is very much sort of like, together we can work together. It goes into all sorts as well, because art also then goes into the whole world of sort of like permaculture and growing and food, and art goes into it's so wide.
It really is. It's a beautiful message too. And Grant, I believe just the other night, you and I were having our talk on Spaced Out Radio, and we brought up that oneness doesn't necessarily mean we're all alike and we're all exactly the same. It's more like, in the oneness, all of our differences unite us and make us stronger, which was something you brought up with that ultimate symbol adding up to unity. And that's just beautiful. It's a wonderful message for the entire world, or should we say galaxy, multiverse.
Yeah, I mean, we've been taught that we're just one thing, and we're not. And
Right.
that we can be an individual and we can be a unity consciousness at the same time, and we can be experiencing that at the same time.
Mhm.
It's like we have a left brain and a right brain. We have this left brain which is experiencing space and time, and we have that right brain while we're awake experiencing a completely separate thing, and we can work with those dualities.
Yeah.
We just accept that we're both. We don't have to be one or the other. We don't have to choose.
Are you optimistic in terms of, like, you see the constant more and more division all the time and in the world? Are you optimistic that we're going to be able to, or that you or all the people that are on this understanding are going to be able to shift it in time?
Well, it's interesting because I talked to the ants yesterday or the day before, and
Wow.
the ants were saying they're concerned.
Wow.
Um, and so, yeah, I do think that this is the make or break, but it's a very interesting time to be here. Um,
You,
am I optimistic? Well, you know what? It's the only path, so we
yeah.
have to make it happen. It's as simple as that, really.
Do you feel honored to be a part of this? Because I mean, you've talked about the shift, and if you know the Chandler Bashar, he said before it happened, he said next year is going to be very, what do you call it, Nicole? He had a word for it. It's going to be uh, crazy. He called it, it's going to be absolutely crazy. Stay out of the middle of this thing. And there's a channeler I follow, Paul Selleck, who said, you always think that there's the thing that you have to worry about is on top of the table, whether you're going to put milk or cream into your tea or your coffee. And he did this channeling session. He didn't even recall it. Somebody else brought it up, where he said the table is about to be turned upside down, and all that was built in fear is going to come to the surface. And so you got this same sort of message about this shift, about the fact that you've got to move now. This is taking on to be role at the leading edge, whatever your role is. So that's why I always see it is that you're awake, and almost like the Bible says, too much is given, much is expected. That because you understand, you can't say, well, I just didn't have time. I had other things to do. That you've been given this information. Do you feel this urgency, and do you feel very honored to be a part of this thing that's the shift?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is I just keep getting to hurry up. In 2019, I had no idea why they were saying hurry up. But they're saying hurry up. I think, yeah, it's an absolute privilege. And, because I'm sitting in the art world, I say, well, we're sitting in front row seats at the moment. We've got the front row seats. What a privilege to be in the front row seats, not even with restricted visibility. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. Um, but yeah, I mean, like there's messages that come through. I think last week I was told about humanity splitting in two between watchers and makers, and so I was given that message is this kind of split. But then I was also then given the image of the golden thread that connected both the watchers and the makers. The watchers, you can look into that. I just get given these, and then I have to sort of research what these terms mean. But watchers can be sort of like perceived as the people maybe observing, but they're also a different type of human, I've been told. But the makers are the ones who create. I suppose they manifest, they co-create reality. So, but the two are connected through this golden thread, which connects everything in the universe. Um, and so it's important to understand that within that duality, we also have that connection. And then the other message that I got a little while back was that I was told it's not rule of three anymore. It's more like rule of five. And from ruler, I then obviously had to go. I have to sit there and work out what these things mean. Rule of three. You can think of it in this way. You can think of it if you put a thought out there, like I don't like that person. That negativity is going to come back at you threefold. Or you can put it this way, you can go, I want the very best for this person, or that's going to come back at you threefold. But now it will come back at you fivefold. So you've got to be very careful of your, we've got to, I suppose, in a way, be able to train our mind, work more work with more responsibility around our minds, because it'll come back fivefold. But it also seems to be the speed as well. So we had a lovely moment when we did the co-creation with the artists in July. It was in Liverpool, and it was thunder and lightning. And we had all the audience turning up, and everybody had been working so hard to create this performance, 3 performances. We were insane. And so the artists all went into a circle, and we did an intention, and everybody just sat in the circle, and we did an intention. It was just to put forward what we wanted for that day. I didn't tell anyone what to think or what intention to put forward. But I knew that everybody was basically saying they didn't want it to rain. Because we didn't want rain and thunder during this performance. But it was an outdoor performance, and the stage would have been slippy, and let's face it, you can't really dance and perform and do jumps and things on a slippy stage. And so we got a weather window, and we got it for the exact period of time that we needed to do these 3 performances. A mile down the road, it was thunder and lightning all day. Wow. Over that whole area, but there was just a little circle just around us, little weather window. So yeah, the artists are, collectively capable of also manifesting together in some way with that intention.
I'll let Nicole get a question, but I got to get something in here quickly because I'll forget about it. But when you mention this message, you almost see the synchronicity of all the people. I mentioned this Paul Selleck. I just discovered this guy about a month ago, and I listened to everything he's done, like 30, 40 hours of podcasts and stuff. And what he said is the message he's been given is almost identical to what you were saying, that everything is divinity. It's all divine. That when you separate something from the divine, when you take it and put it into darkness, that will draw you into the darkness. And then he said, the other thing he said, that the basic message was, whatever you damn and whoever you damn, damns you back. And whatever you bless will bless you in return. And this is the guy that said the table's going to get turned upside down. And that's the same sort of message you have, is this idea that whatever you put out comes back. This sort of idea, what goes around comes around, or as Bashar says, what you put out comes back. And so the message is coming across, you're getting it in a different aspect, but when you look across the spectrum, there are different entities or whatever is intelligence that is putting these messages through various people. And you're talking again about this time frame, that everybody talks about this time frame, that something is about to happen. Like the UFO experiencers will all say, why am I being taken? What's going on? And they'll say, when the time is right, you'll know what to do. And it's the same sort of thing, is like there's a shift taking place or whatever's happening, and everybody's sort of being alerted. And there are certain people who are carrying this message, and you're one of them.
Yeah, and like one of the other things is that there's been a increase in beings that I've seen recently. It started in February 2020. It just felt like there was just a massive increase in the sort of you'd be seeing blue beings and ant beings and all sorts of different beings that you'd never seen before, and they all seem to be coming in to watch.
So a quick question. Yeah. I mean, you're laughing and smiling here. It doesn't sound like even the giant ants made you go, there's a giant ant. So talk to me about that. I mean, most people see a giant ant, they're going to look for a giant fly swatter or at least run away. So you're encountering other beings and you realize that that's what it is. Have you ever had those moments where you're taken aback, or is it like meeting part of your family?
I mean, you've just got to be we all come in different forms. I mean, when I first met the ants, it was like, they look very different to us. They look very different. They really do. I mean, they're sort of they're not even like ants. They're sort of on they walk on their 4 legs, and they're upright, and they have their antenna, and they've got these big eyes, and they talk telepathically. And yes, they do. And And like even just their hands and just they've got like they've got like a shell casing, you know, it's like an external exoskeleton.
People
They're
describe
yeah.
the mantids and it's like overwhelming love. It's like when you're in the presence of one of these giant mantis looking beings, it's like the ultimate love. So I was wondering if it was similar with the ants or if it was like the ultimate giggles or something.
No, you just have to go, okay, well, I'm seeing that now.
Mm.
Okay, okay, not seen that one before. This is new. And then like, I'd be talking to friends and go, yeah, there's one standing here right next to me now. Because it's a different frequency. It's just
Yeah.
simply just tuning the dial. Yeah, the ants have lived here longer than us. They're great. They're obviously fantastic in terms of co-creation and understanding how to work collectively. So they're great in terms of guiding that. Um, is it great love? I don't know. They sort of moved in. Like I'd be like, one of them's looking in my fridge, and one was just lying down on the sofa. I mean, they just moved in, and it was like I was being observed because they like the first time I saw them, it was like one of them just looked at me and he just like, you can see me. He was more shocked than me, I think.
Well,
And
that's my always thought. The other side of this, it's like we see these beads and we're taken aback and wrap our head around it. It's like, what do they think when they're like, see a human, they're like, skinny looking fleshy pink thing, or like, what is that? Look at those tiny eyes. Like, I don't know. Why is there really hair on top of their head? Like, I don't know. And the smile factor, we always laugh. Like we smile, and that means we're happy. Do they think we're trying to eat them? Like, like, showing our teeth. So I think,
luckily we're in different dimensions, so
I
I think
think, I think a good way to put it though is once you recognize that spirit, it doesn't matter what the shell or the meat suit is. It's like we're connected by spirit or the ultimate consciousness, and we can recognize that in others. So it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing
yeah,
so much.
you have to be open.
Mhm.
Can I ask you about healing? You mentioned, and I actually was trained as a Bankston healer, and they had this method. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it was basically, as soon as I heard it, I went, this is right brain, left brain. That what they gave you is 20 ego images. I want a new apartment, or it looks like this, and it's this big, and you imagine all these ego things that your left brain would really love to have, and then you cycle these things in your head, and they teach you to do it faster and faster and faster and faster until you can do it thousands of seconds. You're doing these things and they're just spinning around in your head, and that basically sends the left brain off for tea and coffee, and then you get the healer out of the way, and then the healing comes through. So I want to ask you about the healing with the hands, because they described to us that your right brain, that the heat would come out of the left hand, which is run by the right brain, the female brain. And I still remember in the training session, I was absolutely, because I never thought it would happen. I was absolutely floored when suddenly this heat was coming out of my left hand. I went, these people are making this up. This is for real. So tell me about the healing that's involved with what you have.
Well, I mean, like, I think I've always been doing it, but I was always doing it with working with community, and I wanted to know more of what was happening. And it's that thing of when you can be more conscious of these tools, you can use them better. And so it was always running through and out my hands, but I didn't know what was going on. And so then I went, I walked into a bookshop in LA, and there was a guy just teaching healing. And he just came up to me and said, "You're a healer." I was like, "Okay."
Wow.
And, and he said, "Oh, good. You're lucky. You're from England. You can go where I learned how to be a healer." And he wrote down the name, the Healing Trust in England. And so I just went through their training system. It's very simple, but I learned their process, because I think it's like anything, isn't it? It's like it's good to know the different methods. There's just many methods, and you find the ones that are right for you, and you can mix and match. So with the healing, it's you do the grounding, and then you bring the energy through down. It's very important to do the grounding, because for me, you've got to bring the energy up as well, because we've got this inverted idea that it's bad down there. when really it's full of love, and that's where healing happens. So you pull the energy up through the earth, and you then also pull it down through the, sort of wherever it's coming. It can come as a beautiful light down, and then you just allow it to attune into you, and then suddenly your hands will turn on, and then they get very hot, and then I usually work in the etheric field rather than hands-on, because we're an electric field. Science is proving this. We're okay. We're not mad. And so it seems that one hand is putting the energy in and the other hand is sucking it out. So it seems like it's acting like a pump. And with those hands as well, you can usually feel what's going on within the body. It's kind of a rebalancing, a recalibration, but you're simply just a channel. You're just a conduit. You're simply being used as a vessel because you're sitting within this dimension, and you're able to work as a sort of, like, I suppose, an antenna, transmitter, receiver. And as long as you've put the intention that you're happy to be that person doing that, then it'll come through. And often when you're doing that healing, I'll see beings, I'll see people's guides. I also say that healing is a co-healing process, because it's the person being healed who needs to be in the process with you. And it's important to say that we're not the healers, we're just the channel.
Exactly. There's a funny joke that, I don't know if you follow how much the UFO stuff you follow, but Ray Hernandez, who did this big survey with 3,000 experiencers, people who believe that had contact with a non-human intelligence, whatever we wanted to find it, said, if I had $1 for every person who does Reiki healing in this field, I'd be a rich man. And it seems to come with it. Like when you open up, then that comes as well. So one last question I have that I want to ask you is, what would be, if you were to talk to people based upon your extensive experience in terms of interacting with intelligence and being told stuff and learning and understanding, what will be your view of the world? How does it actually work? What are we here for? Where are we going? What's this all about?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you sometimes question whether you're even human if you're if you're sitting and having these experiences, and you do wonder why some people have them and some people don't. Like, my family have them; it's in my family, but it's rare to find, which is great because you're not on your own. But it's rare to find. It could just be we're all just collectively mad. Created that together, but it's like you do wonder, sort of like, why you're here and why other people aren't having that experience. But I was always told, actually, as a child, it's in all of us. It's in all of us. You just open up to it as much or as little as you wish. I was always told we're all the same. We all have the same capabilities. And it's how much and how far we want to go. In terms of my kind of like mission and purpose, I do think that it is, my name means helper. That's what Alexis means, helper. It's probably why there's the Alexas out there that people ask what the weather's like and play music. It's probably because it means helper. So yeah, I suppose that is my role, and that's what I've done is to work to create cohesion between people and connection between people all my life. What's my ethos? Yeah, I think we're probably sort of doing this for source, for the creator, whatever we want to call it, this amazing energy and force that has created all of this world, these worlds. And I think we're sort of sitting there, and maybe our role here is to learn to be what a human is. I don't think we're all human yet. It's to learn what a human is and what a human's capable of, because I think we've barely scratched the surface, and then to take our place within the universe, within that. But yeah, I think our role's here to learn what it is to be human. My purpose is probably to help with some of that. It's very difficult. I mean, one of the things when you're given precog dreams, the thing I learned is you've got to share what you've just seen.
Yeah.
And so that's really simply it. You just got to simply share. It doesn't mean that you have the answers, and it's not that you're responsible for everything that you've seen, because some of these things are beyond your control, but you've got to be able to share it with your tribe in order to help. Beyond that, I have no idea. And sometimes I'm just told not to worry. We'll never be able to comprehend it.
I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful way to wrap this up though. And I think it fits perfectly with what we were discussing about right brain and left brain and duality, because for if we continue with that, for however many of us there are pushing this envelope and speaking about it, the dualistic side of that would be that there is the other side that is going to be quiet and maybe just listen, and they won't come forth with it, or they might be in opposition, but achieving the balance is the goal. It's not to have more on one side than the other. So we keep talking, they'll keep listening, the balance stays maintained.
Maybe Alexis, have you got any websites or way people can contact you and learn about your stuff? Because I think it's so extremely important. I didn't know about you, and I hear now you're doing a PhD and you're documenting this stuff, and it seems like you have a significant role or a significant message, I guess it would be, that I think people need to hear. So how would they contact you? And do you have a website where you document this stuff? And I guess the other thing I would want to ask is if we have a panel, whether you can come on, because I think we do have these panels with artists where I think you would be a great reservoir for everybody else to bounce stuff off of, because you seem to be really at the leading edge of the what I think is a very important subject.
That's really lovely of you to say, and I'd be delighted. I'd really be delighted to sort of take part. So first comes with apologies. I'm absolutely awful with social media and all forms of websites. I've had that many websites that I've never tended to or gardened and looked after. It's really interesting for someone who's all about connecting. I really do connect. I seem to want to work on a more sort of etheric level than an internet level. There's a YouTube channel called Collective Moves, which is collectivemoves.co.uk. I think it is. I think it's called that, or .com. I think it's .co.uk. And so that's sort of it's just an infant site where artists who are co-creating, we're putting their videos up and starting the movement of getting artists to work collectively. And there will be a website which will be collectivemoves.com, which is sitting there saying coming soon if you Google it. But you can reach me through that. And also it's very important to say that it's, I mean, like that, this 2015 search to find others, find each other it's like, even last night I had a dream which is, we all need to come together and work together. It's really pretty important. So I'd love to meet others who are working in this way or open to working in this way.
I will make a pretty safe prediction here. After we post these videos and audio, we usually get a lot of feedback and people are wondering how they can get a hold of our guests. So I'm going to predict we're going to get a wave of people that would like to connect. And
that's brilliant.
This network that you have. So thank you so much for joining us today, Alexis. It's been a wonderful chat. I'm so glad you found Grant.
Yeah. It's especially when I didn't even know who you were or what you were doing. And it seems like this is like a major thing. Whatever we can do to promote what you're doing, I guarantee you we'll promote this, because that's what I see my role as well, is to find the messages and then to get them out. And I even talk to people, you may know I have a book publishing company, and it's called It's All Connected. And it's been called that for many, many years. And it's basically to talk with a lot of experiencers. Now I'm talking to you, but experiences not always say, have you written this down? You got this story, have you written it down? Do you think maybe you should write it for your children and your grandchildren? And I've encouraged people and helped people sort of put the material out, because as you said, I mean, it's one thing to have it. It's another when they want you to share it, that like the biblical thing, too much is given, much is expected, that if you're given stuff and expected to share it, that it doesn't really help if you can do it in the etheric realm, but to put the stuff out. So whatever we can do to promote you, we will do. And I think you're doing very important work. And I thank you for reaching out to me, and we'll go from there. And maybe you can send us those symbols, those 3 symbols, and we'll maybe even have some interaction back and forth, that I can maybe do a couple of articles on the stuff that you've gotten in the messages, because you're getting the messages, you're getting the symbols, and it seems like you are at the apex of some important message that somebody wants put out, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help you put it out.
Yeah, I'm being told. Got to share it. Can't
Yeah.
hide anymore.
Wow.
I love that.
There's
Share with
Yeah,
them.
and I'd also say with those symbols, is contemplate on them. The more you spend understanding, this idea of connection, compassion, power, the more you'll be able to comprehend. It's simply just a recipe for how we can work better together. So yeah.
Wow. And you're open to doing interviews? I have a lot of people I think would want to do an interview with you. Alan Seinfeld,
Oh, yeah.
you mentioned the one. Has Alan interviewed you yet?
No, I'm literally just this is me reaching out. I've been told
There we
to, so I'm doing it.
So,
I'm
so
listening.
you mentioned him in your email, I believe. Alan Seinfeld will be giving you a call. He's an artist out of New York City. He's done a lot with artists and stuff, and I think he'd be absolutely fascinated to talk to you about what you're doing. And he would have a lot of contacts of people that you should talk to. But we may even get you on Spaced Out Radio, or there's a bunch of people that I'm pretty sure would want to talk to you, because it's almost like this is the beginning, but you're getting more and more people when you talk about it, when I talk about it, where they realize there is a music connection, there is an art connection, and they may ignore it for a while, but then you hear it for the 10th time and you go, maybe I should look into this. And people, that's the way we raise consciousness. It's almost like, the way I put it is, your mission, my mission is no different than any other social or political movement. It's not because it's an important issue that everybody should shut down what they're doing and do what we're doing. It's, you've got to get it out there and raise the consciousness to a point where everybody just says, oh yeah, I knew that already. They just instinctively know it because they've heard it so many times. And that whether it's African American rights or gay rights or whatever, nobody had an easy method. It's not like you get an easy road. We have to do the work in order to get it out. And as long as they spell your name right, when it comes down to it, enough people here, they're going to make the right decision as to what's right and what's wrong.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank
you
so
for
much.
joining us. This is a thrilling interview. I just loved it.
Well, thank you.
We'll have you back, I'm sure. But thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day.